Once upon a time, in a distant past known as the Middle Ages, there lived a happy family in a beautiful farmstead. Later, a beautiful daughter was born to this family. They named this beautiful girl Cinderella. And so the tale of Cinderella began like this. They lived a very happy life until Cinderella's mother fell ill with a rare and severe sickness, and they lost her. For many years, Cinderella and her father lived together on their small farm. Cinderella's father was afraid of leaving her alone in case something happened to him, so he decided to remarry and began to search for a suitable wife. His friends introduced him to another woman living in a different city, who had 2 daughters around Cinderella's age. Eventually, Cinderella's father and the woman agreed to marry, and they did. Shortly after, the woman and her 2 daughters moved into Cinderella and her father's home. Cinderella was a very kind-hearted girl, and was delighted to have 2 new sisters. However, her stepsisters were not as kind-hearted as Cinderella. They were conceited, selfish, jealous, and troublesome children. Their mother wasn't a good woman either, but she pretended to be one. One day, Cinderella's father announced that he had to go on a long journey for work. He asked everyone what they wanted, one by one. The stepmother and stepsisters asked for dresses, various shoes, and jewelry. Cinderella simply said, "Father, I just want you to come back soon." While her father was away, her stepmother and stepsisters began to treat Cinderella very poorly, making her do all the chores around the house. Despite their mistreatment, Cinderella endured everything to ensure there were no problems in her father's absence. Months later, a messenger arrived at the farm and delivered the news that Cinderella's father had been in an accident on the road and had died. Cinderella was devastated, but she had to accept it. Her wicked stepmother and stepsisters were not saddened by the news. Instead, they rejoiced at the thought of inheriting the house. Soon after, Cinderella's stepmother revealed her true colors and assigned Cinderella to live in the kitchen downstairs, making her do all the cooking and household chores. Cinderella couldn't assert herself, thinking she had to endure it for her father's sake. She thought to herself, "They may be lazy and selfish, but they are still my family." She moved to the kitchen downstairs and began doing all the housework, cooking meals. She had such a beautiful heart that she enjoyed doing every task, singing songs while she worked. The birds came to join her singing, and she fed all the animals in the garden. She even befriended cute little mice. At night, when it was very cold, she slept on a mat near the fire, with the mice keeping her company. One morning, her stepsisters came to breakfast singing. Cinderella was surprised because they were usually very grumpy, but she didn't let their kindness deceive her. However, her stepsisters revealed that they were happy because they had been invited to a ball at the palace. The king had invited all the young girls in the kingdom to the ball. Cinderella thought she could go too since it was for all young girls. However, she had no dress to wear as her old ones no longer fit her. Her stepmother had never bought her a dress. Suddenly, she remembered the attic where her mother's dresses were stored and quickly went up there. She found her mother's dress, which was a bit loose but thought she could alter it. She finished altering it and came downstairs. Her stepmother and stepsisters were angry to see her looking so beautiful. Her stepmother yelled, "Why did you get ready, Cinderella? Who told you that you could come?" Cinderella replied, "But the king invited all the young girls." Her stepsisters yelled, "You, Cinderella, you are our servant, you can't come." They grabbed her dress and tore it apart. Cinderella was heartbroken. They left for the ball, leaving Cinderella crying in the garden, wondering why they treated her so badly. The little mice and birds came to comfort her. Suddenly, a light shone through the night, and a beautiful woman emerged from the light. She stroked Cinderella's hair and said, "Don't cry, Cinderella. You are kind-hearted and beautiful. You deserve to go to the ball more than anyone." Cinderella looked at her in amazement and asked, "Thank you. Who are you?" The beautiful woman replied, "I am the fairy of good people. It is my duty to help kind-hearted people. I will send you to the ball." Cinderella asked, "But how can I go? My dress is torn and I have no carriage." The fairy said, "Bring me a pumpkin." Cinderella grabbed the pumpkin from the backyard and the fairy touched it with her wand. There was a loud noise and a magnificent carriage appeared. Then the fairy touched the mice, turning them into horses. The fairy said, "I need one more creature." She saw a lizard and turned it into the coachman with her wand. Cinderella said sadly, "Everything is ready, but I can't go to the ball in these clothes." The good fairy said, "Don't worry, Cinderella, I'll take care of it." She touched Cinderella with her wand, and suddenly everything was illuminated. Cinderella appeared in a stunning dress with beautiful glass slippers and shining stars in her hair. The fairy said, "You must hurry, Cinderella. You have until midnight. You must leave the palace before midnight. When the clock strikes 12, everything will return to its original state. Only your dress and shoes will remain with you. Don't forget and watch the time." Cinderella thanked the fairy and hugged her before getting into the carriage. As they approached the palace, they could hear music playing, indicating that the ball had already begun. The prince sat on the side, watching the young people dancing, unable to find anyone worthy. The king, seeing his son's distress, hoped to find a young girl who would please him. He invited all the young girls in the kingdom to the ball, but his son still didn't find anyone. As the night went on, trumpets began to play. It signaled that a new young girl had arrived. Cinderella appeared at the top of the grand staircase. The prince, the king, and everyone in the ballroom looked at the new girl. Cinderella walked hesitantly toward the ballroom, feeling embarrassed. The prince immediately got up and almost ran to her. The king was surprised and happy to see his son finally interested in someone. The prince took Cinderella's hand and led her to the center of the ballroom, inviting her to dance. They danced together all night. The prince only had eyes for Cinderella and didn't want to leave her side. However, as the hours passed, Cinderella checked the clock and realized it was almost midnight. She exclaimed, "I have to leave, my prince," and ran out of the palace. As she descended the stairs of the palace, one of her glass slippers slipped off her foot, but she didn't have time to go back. She immediately got into the carriage and left. The prince, noticing her departure, followed.